Back with a full hour with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about the situation we've been talking about all week. Before we broke, I told you that I was on the phone with my father, and he says, you know, you're talking about all this scary stuff. Glenn, we're the United States of America. Nobody can come in here and destroy us. And I said, Dad, if people don't wake up, that's exactly what's going to happen. Please, convince my father and others like him that that is a possibility.
What your father says is absolutely true in the case of deterrable powers. The Soviet Union had enough firepower to destroy the United States, but they realized that you would destroy them, so they were deterred. They were not suicidal. But militant Islam is suicidal. They often put their zealotry, their ideology above their survival. That's why you didn't have any communist suicide bombers, but militant Islam produces hordes of them, battalions, and they smash into buildings in New York. Now, do you doubt that if, for example, Al-Qaeda had nuclear weapons, this city would not exist today?
I'd be gone.
Where does your father live?
Seattle.
No, that's far away, but they could get there too, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And Seattle could disappear because they're not deterrable. That's the whole point. If they were a normal power, a normal regime, without this crazy messianic cult of death, the idea that millions have to die in order for their particular Islamic Messiah to come. Millions have to die, and the sooner the better, in their view. Mm-hmm. Because they have this cult, that's what makes them so dangerous if they acquire nuclear weapons to realize it. So your father is right if you were dealing with the Soviet Union,
sure,
or with Russia, or with China, or with India. None of the powers, the powers that have nuclear powers today, have this zealotry, this mad ideology. But Iran does. So if Iran acquires it, and they think that you're their worst nemesis, we're just an underling, we're just your subordinate, we happen to be a small Satan, a small appendage of America. But their goal is to reverse 1,000 years of history, the rise of the West, the rise of America. This was a mistake of history that has to be corrected through this apocalypse. Don't wait for them to realize this. Don't let this David Koresh in Tehran get his hands on atomic weapons so he can test out his theories on us or on you.
Okay, I had a conversation with Rush Limbaugh this week, and when you're on his program, you don't usually disagree with him because he's a pretty bright man. And he said, Glenn, I think this is coming, and I think the world is going to change within the next 15 years. And I said, I hate to disagree with you, but I think we may have 3. How long do we have before it is just too late to wake up?
There are different estimates, but they all hover between the 2 to 4, 5-year range. And we may be wrong. We were wrong about North Korea, and it turned out that they could
North Korea, when you say North Korea, you know, North Korea, we said it's unacceptable for North Korea to have nuclear weapons. I think when you know, we saw those pictures of that mountain where they tested. I think when we see the ground rise up in Iran, I think when you see that they've successfully tested a nuclear weapon, I don't think they say, hey, well, I'm going to wait for the UN to tell us. I think they make a call to us and say, get all of your stuff and get out of the Middle East, and then game on.
Yeah, well, they'll go a lot further than that, I can tell you.
Well, yeah.
How long will it take? The estimates could be wrong. I was referring to the fact that people thought that North Korea would take longer to produce a device, the first device. And here, we think, we don't know. The official statement given by the chief of Israeli intelligence, and I can say this because it was publicized, it was said in our Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, in our Knesset, our parliament, he said it'll take them anywhere up to 3 years to cross all the nuclear technology threshold, and then it takes about a year or 2 to weaponize. But this, at most, would give us 5 years. It could very well be next year. Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran, is boasting that he's on an express train.
Right.
I'm worried about the survival of my country. But so was Czechoslovakia. It was engulfed, and the Jewish people were engulfed by Hitler. So what? That was on the path towards engulfing the world. And when you have this religious fanatic cult, you do not let it aimed hating the United States, wanting to bring down the United States, and anything associated with it, like Israel. You do not let these fanatics get their hands on atomic bombs. And tell your father that they're not deterrable. That's the main problem. They're not deterrable.
People have said that I was nuts when I said before we went into Iraq, it ain't about Iraq. This is about Iran. Right, wrong, and why?
I think you're right. I think in the larger... there's a pecking order here. I think Afghanistan was the first one. It dispatched al-Qaeda. You got them. Right to do. By getting Iraq, you got Libya. Libya dismantled its nuclear program. But Libya and Saddam Hussein's Iraq were essentially neighborhood bullies, very dangerous, very poisonous. But you could either bring down their dictatorship or force them to become reborn, okay, as Gaddafi is trying to be. They are not suicidal. Iran, if you got Iran, you would have folded the entire chain down, and you would have eliminated the most virulent and the most dangerous of the lot. This is a regime that seeks to influence a billion people worldwide, a billion Muslims. Now, granted, they're not going to influence a billion Muslims, but suppose they influence 10%. That's 130 million or over 100 million people. And it's not merely the ability to incite radicals in every Western capital, or anywhere from San Francisco to Bali, Indonesia, and Bali and even north-south, anywhere. It is that they will have the nuclear weapons to back up terror. They'll have terror with a nuclear umbrella. So the terror that we've seen will be on a scale we haven't seen. And the greatest terror of all is that they may actually use atomic bombs against our cities and our countries.
Okay. More with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in just a minute. We get to Iraq, and also why so many Jewish people here in America vote for the Democrats. Welcome back to the program. We're spending a whole hour with ex-Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel. Are you going to run again?
Yes.
Good. Let's talk a little bit about Iran. About Iraq. First, honest question. Are you afraid of us? Are you afraid that we're going soft?
Maybe in the short term, the United States could have some setbacks. In the long term, the free peoples always win, but the question is at what cost? So
that really wasn't the question. I'll let you escape. I'll probe one more time. You're afraid we're going... I don't think most people understand the fear that people live under of these kooks that are beheading people. Yeah. But they're saying if the Iraqis want it so bad, they should step up for it, and we will leave them because most people think that it's their responsibility.
Look, I won't get into a debate on Iraq because in a way I think it sidelines the main argument. What you decide to do, it's an American decision. Whether you leave in phases, you leave with a timetable, you leave with no timetable, you stay in Iraq, okay? Either way, if Iran acquires nuclear weapons next door, you lose Iraq. Not only do you lose Iraq, you lose the entire Middle East, and you lose control of the world oil supply, and your cities come under a nuclear threat of a crazy, fanatic regime. So the question is, why is the American debate exclusively focused on Iraq when you should look next door? And the last thing you should do, whatever you decide on Iraq, I would give one piece of advice. Do not mortgage that solution to the Iranians. Do not get into a situation where you're giving the Iranians any kind of license to develop their nuclear program in exchange for anything that they do with you in Iraq, do or not do. You should stop the Iranian nuclear program because it is a great threat to the security of the world and the security of the United States.
Let me give you my biggest fear. My biggest fear is we only have 1 minute. Let me state it, and then I want to come back because I want to hear your full answer on this. My biggest fear is that you're being set up, that Israel is going to, we're not going to do anything about it. The rest of the world is already starting to talk. Hey, let's talk peace with Iran. Let's bring Iran and Syria in as partners for peace, which is absolutely insane. You will be sitting in a position saying, okay, well, we can't deal with it. You'll go in and do something about it, and then the whole world will turn and say, it's Israel. We were close to peace.
Yeah, well, that's what they said about Czechoslovakia when they sacrificed it for Hitler, and they thought they'd have peace in their time, and the Munich Accords, and it turned out to have been merely feeding the wolf and whetting its appetite. Okay. But I'll tell you one thing. Somebody has to take out the Iranian nuclear program.
Okay, I want to get to that. We have to take a quick break. Back in a minute.